Storm and Stalker. It was a stormy night. The rain enveloped the world in silence, its sound seeming to echo on every surface. Ella was coming home late from work. Her headlights barely made it through the rain. Her mind wandered home to her bed and warmth. It was a stark contrast to the cold and darkness of the car. As she approached a little-used intersection, Ellie noticed a pickup truck parked on the side of the road. The lights were out and I was sitting eerily in the shadows. She passed the car with a feeling of unease, but her relief didn't last long. The headlights of a truck suddenly came on and pulled up behind her, following her car too closely. Every time Ellie turned, the truck mimicked her movements, staying menacingly close. The lonely road, which was usually a comfort, now felt threatening. The rain was getting heavier, blurring her vision and adding to her fear. As we got closer to home, a warning light came on in Ellie's dashboard. She hadn't realized that she was very low on fuel, and a new worry dawned on her. Her house was only a few blocks away, but her car was rattling. Ellie had no choice but to stop, and gasped when a pickup truck pulled up behind her. The rain was pounding on her roof like a harbinger of a ritual. She immediately called for help, but the storm disrupted communications and her cries for help were drowned out by static. 3 people emerged from the truck and approached her car. They moved with purpose and were unfazed by the rain. The dim streetlights cast long shadows, and I could see that the lead figure was holding something metallic and threatening. A thought ran through Ellie's mind. She remembered that there was a self-defense spray in the glove box when she saw a man banging on her window. Signaling her to open the door, Ellie acted on instinct. She took out the spray, opened the window a little and pointed it outside. The sound of the spray was drowned out by the storm, but the effect was immediate. People were holding their faces. They backed away, clutching their faces, losing their balance. Ellie seized the opportunity and slammed the car door open with all her might. She took off running, slipping on the wet pavement and letting the bone-chilling rain wash over her. Behind her she heard chows and screams as her attackers regrouped. But she didn't turn around. A light appeared ahead. It was a neighbor's house, and its front porch was a beacon of safety. Ellie banged on the door, out of breath, soaked and shaking with fear. The door opened and she collapsed into the safety of the bright hall. The storm was raging outside, but the nightmare she had escaped was now a distant memory. There was a village tucked away in a deep mountain valley called Mist Village. The village was always shrouded in a thick fog, and rarely received visitors from outside. The villagers lived quietly within the mist, avoiding contact with the outside world as much as possible. The reason for this lies in an old legend passed down in the village. The legend that dominated the village was, you must never leave the village on a day when the fog clears. No one knows exactly when this legend began. However, the village elders taught that anyone who goes outside on a clear day in the mist never returns. One year, a young man from the village, Kenji, began to have doubts about this legend. Curious about the outside world, he ignored the advice of the villagers and stepped outside the village on a foggy day. That day, it had been several years since the sky had been clear and blue since the morning. Kenji walked through the old wooden gate at the edge of the village. He couldn't hide his excitement when he saw the fog clearing. He could hear the voices of villagers behind him trying to stop him, but he shook them off and continued on. A few hours had passed since they had left the village, and Kenji noticed something strange. As he went on, the air around him grew colder and heavier. Then suddenly, the mist began to appear around him again. This fog was different from that of the village, and gave off an indescribable stench. Even though he felt scared, he kept going forward, hoping to discover something. Soon, Kenji came across an old house. The house seemed uninhabited for a long time, with vegetation covering the windows. His curiosity led him to approach the house and have a look inside. The inside of the house was dusty and dark, but suddenly, his eye was caught by a photograph hanging on the wall. The photo showed a young man, but his face was cut out, and in the face area, Kenji's own face seemed to be reflected. He tried to leave the scene quickly, but was attacked by someone when he got outside. When Kenji woke up, he was in a fog again. He hurried back to the village, but no matter how far he walked, the village never appeared. The fog grew thicker and thicker until it completely enveloped him. And then he realized that the village legend is true. If you leave the village on a clear day, you can never come back. Kenji was left to wander in the fog. His story is sometimes told on the outskirts of the village. But when the fog clears, no one believes it. That day the village will be covered in fog again, cutting it off from the outside world. There was an old village hidden deep in the mountains. Every year on August 15th during the Obon festival, a festival called the Tenjo Festival was held there, in which the entire village participated. However, this festival had 3 strict taboos that had to be observed, and the peace of the village depended on them. That summer, Takashi, one of the village's youngest residents, made a plan to challenge the taboo with his childhood friends Misaki and Yu. The first taboo was that on the day before the festival, people were not to approach the forest behind the shrine called Onagake. According to legend, the forest has long been home to evil spirits, and the village's guardian deity was sealed there. The plan was to sneak into the forest the night before the festival, when no one was looking, and touch an ancient shrine that was said to exist there. Feeling excited and scared, the 3 of them slipped out of the middle of the village and secretly headed towards the forest. The entrance to the forest is usually tightly closed, but the 3 of them reach Onagake Pond via a path that Takashi had prepared in advance. The forest was darker than I had imagined, and there was an eerie feeling that something was lurking. The only light they could rely on was the flashlight they brought from the village. As they approached the shrine, they began to hear strange sounds and movements all around them. But out of curiosity and fear, the 3 continued on. When I arrived at the shrine, I noticed that it was made of old stone, and felt like it had some kind of sacred power. The moment Misaki first touched the shrine, the entire forest was enveloped in a strange silence. Then, with an ominous feeling, they heard an angry voice calling to the 3 from afar. Terrified, the 3 ran through the forest, as if they were being chased by something, and returned to the village. However, the changes that have taken place in the village since that night are immeasurable. On festival day, the usual hustle and bustle was gone, and the villagers were all quiet, with fearful looks on their faces. Gradually, the whole village was enveloped in an uneasy atmosphere. The Tenjo festival was no longer held the following year, and people began to leave the village one after another. Before long, the village was deserted, as if it had vanished, and its former bustle was forgotten. When Takashi and his friends broke the taboo, something was released that engulfed the village. This story is the last known record of the village that is said to have existed, and no one has ever visited the site to this day. No one can ever know the truth about the village that disappeared into the mountains. A few years later, a group of inquisitive college students heard about the story and set off on an expedition to try to solve the mystery of the missing village. After a long time, they finally find the location, only to find a barren patch of land and the ruins of an old shrine. However, that night, an eerie voice echoed through their camp, and by morning no one had seen the group. Rumors are still circulating among the neighboring villagers that the village curse still forbids intruders.